All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour, so let's go ahead and get started. Everyone, welcome. My name is Craig O'Neill, and we have some special guests with us today. The topic, first and foremost, is implementing effectively. We stamped DVI right on there because that's a process everyone likes to talk about, and it's something that we all can relate to at this stage. We're going to be leveraging the 5-step process introduced by our guest, Kent Bullard, and his colleague, Mark Seawell. So Ken, I'd love for you to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kent Bullard. I am the Chief Operations Officer at the Institute for Automotive Business Excellence. I've been in this industry about 10 years, we've worked with hundreds of shops. I've gotten the opportunity to work with some amazing automotive professionals and learn a lot along the way. And I'm really excited to share the 5-step workflow process that I have, because I think it's a very effective and simple way to get process in your business.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ken. Mark.
Hey, everybody. I'm Mark Seawell. I'm also at the Institute. What I do for the Institute is I'm one of the business coaches, advisor coaches, trainer. I like to do sales. I've been in this industry a whole bunch of years, too many.
Mark, this isn't your first rodeo either with us.
I got gray hairs to prove it. And no, not my first rodeo. Actually, when I was still at a shop, I was actually searching for a digital inspection software that I could use, and I actually used the Autotext Me moving to Autoflow program, and I thought it was awesome back then, and it's only gotten better. So yeah, good stuff. Welcome in, everybody.
Mark, thanks for joining us again. And yeah, last time we did a webinar with you, you were with RLO. And when we were talking to Vision, I think it was 2 years ago now, that's when I realized, oh, so you guys merged with the Institute or were bought by the Institute. How'd that work?
Yes.
Perfect. Nailed it.
We merged the companies
We did.
under the banner of the Institute. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah, last time I remember, Mark, we were talking the 300% rule, and that has come up repeatedly, and that's helped a lot of people.
Good.
A lot of very good feedback on that.
That's one of the core things that I like to preach all the time, and we call it preaching because that's what I do. I yell at it until it stops working. It hasn't stopped working yet. So
now I've worked with Mark a few times already. You've onboarded Autoflow in shops when you've been coaching in the past. Now I will say that back in Orlando during STX World Pack, we got together, and it was a hot tub gathering. There were no shirts. It was all right though. It was a great time. But that's where I have to make this point with our guests. When you sit in a hot tub with a couple of excellent instructors and you start talking about things that are not just the industry, but your families and everything else, you get to know the heart of the people. And these guys, they both have amazing hearts. Guys, thank you for joining me. This is awesome. And I'm so proud to be able to introduce you to some of our clients who haven't had a chance to hear from you before.
For sure.
Well, thank you, Craig. We appreciate the opportunity. And likewise, it's wonderful to share those conversations with good people. Brilliant.
It's a good time. Now, we asked for some feedback from our attendees, all of you, when we do these registrations. I always have fun doing this. This is my favorite part, by the way, of doing these webinars, is looking at the feedback from everyone on the questions that we ask. And they are usually the most horrible scientific questions, but the results always impress me. Now, this is the question of, do you have any staff that do not follow a key process? And the frequency was in the answers. So take a look at this. Yes, I want to fix it was over a quarter of the responses. I loved that. Yes, ... which I always imagine is, yeah, we have that problem. And then we have yes, on rare occasions. It's sort of like, it happens, but not enough to really, really get my attention with the other fires that we have to put out. And then no, not really. The cool thing is, this is not the first time I've asked this sequence of questions. And this also isn't the first time that I've had staff members of a shop respond and the owner of the shop respond. And I've noticed a trend, guys. And Mark, Ken, I bet you've seen this before when you work with shops too. Is there a difference in the amount of desire to fix a problem between the owner and the staff?
Obviously. The owner has a lot more risk involved and a lot more on the line. Nobody's going to work as hard or as passionate as the owner is going to. Wow. And likewise, the employees themselves are also, their interests are vested differently. They're looking for their quality of life in their position and the growth and the career that they want to have. And so they're not necessarily looking at the same things that the owner is going to be looking at.
Absolutely.
And then sometimes though, the owner doesn't see the problem as it is. Like, I'll play a devil's advocate, where the owner says, yeah, everything's good. Cause I've been in both situations. I've been the owner looking down, and I've been the person, the service advisor or technician looking up. And we're you're going, the world is on fire. And the owner's like, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
And then in truth, and the interesting part is that many times the advisor, technician, manager in some cases doesn't actually see the how small the fire really is. So like it's
their purview is a different space, right? Yeah. Craig, I'm curious to know. So you said you looked at the trends. How many proportionately answered? So we've got 2 good and 2 bad, essentially, right? So it's about split 50-50.
Yeah.
You could say good or bad, right? So no, not really, and yes on rare occasions. Who answered that way more? Was it the
It was pretty polar,
or
actually. I'll share some of those feedback with you. It was very interesting because a lot of times the staff member was like, no, not really, where the owner was, yes, and I want to fix it. And that ratio was enough to catch my, again, not very scientific poll, but fascinating results. What was also really interesting to me is the consistency of some of the verbiage in the free form on the response of the most common things, the hardest things to get buy-in in your shop. And the words, the common phrases are really what I was going for. We heard everything in this. There's diagnostic processes in there, DVI processes were mentioned copiously. But overall, the number one word that we consistently saw was consistency. It is the challenge that we face in our shops. I think across the board, everybody has this to some effect. Not far behind that is obviously communication and other things. Go ahead.
I was going to say those two are so tightly wound. I wasn't surprised that communication was second.
Oh yeah. Yep. It's a key piece of this, and we'll hit on this with your 5-step process, I think, too.
And I want to point out here that I don't necessarily think that those two things. So when you talk about consistency and communication, that causation, right? So what caused what? Was it a breakdown of communication that caused inconsistencies, or was it inconsistencies that caused a breakdown in communication?
Oh, it's brilliant. And this is exactly on point with this resource here as well. We call this a change diagnostic. Chris and I did a class in vision back, I think that was this year. Unbelievable.
I know.
It
seems like it was so long ago.
It wasn't
to me
that long though, man. Yeah, wild. So change diagnostic, right? This is a flow chart. Now, coming from the transmission industry, any of you have ever used a solenoid chart, this sort of thing, just immediately, I like this. This makes sense to me. I can actually see where I am and what this is. We have an outcome on the far right of this screen, and we have these items that are important to make something successful, right? When you have all of these ingredients, when all of these things are met, you have effective change, or in this concept of this process, an effective process that you've rolled out and implemented. When you don't, there's all sorts of other reasons. There's confusion, there's anxiety, there's slow change that just isn't moving as quickly as we'd like. And I know some of you from your feedback, that's exactly where you're facing. And then there's frustration that comes in, and false starts, and all of these things we're going to talk about as we move through. So screen cap this if you want. If you need these resources later on, we'll make sure you know how to get a hold of us as well. But this is a very helpful look at to see what type of frustration or problem you're having and where that issue might be. If you've got confusion from your team, right? Maybe you haven't been clear on that vision. You haven't relayed that why on whatever it is you're trying to do. And in DVI, I think that's kind of one of those key things. Remember, some of you have heard my story before. When I started in my shop doing digital inspections, I was first opposed to inspections. I did not understand the why. I had a Bob Greenwood class, rest in peace, Bob. I mention him all the time. And that's when I was sitting in that class, and I heard him say for the first time, he asked, what's your job, right? What is your job? Hooded sweatshirt technician in a management class for the first time. I raised my hand and said, I fix cars. He said, no, your job, your professional responsibility is to make sure the vehicle is safe, reliable, and efficient. How can you do that if you are not inspecting every single vehicle that comes into the shop? It's like, right? It just rocks you. And that's when you realize you had your why way off. So helpful resource. Let's take a look now at another helpful resource. And Kent, I'm going to let you introduce your 5-step process building process. We have processes for processes. I love this.
Process for process. And this is
And there was a process to building it.
Yeah, we run into, we talk about, I actually had a guy in class and he was like, if I hear the word process one more time, I know I need them. How do I, and so it's like, okay, how can we easily communicate the workflow for implementing process? And so I came up with this. First, we have to decide if it even needs a process in the first place. A lot of guys out there are really stressed saying, well, I know I need them, so I'm just going to make any process. I'm just going to start writing as many as I can. And it's not necessarily like, we don't even know if that process is going to get the outcome or help you reach the goals or vision of the company that you need. You're just writing something to write something. And then also taking it one step further and saying, okay, this needs a process. What's the outcome that this process is supposed to design for us? Before we do all of this legwork, training the team, getting it, getting all the resources for it, all of that. Before we do that, what do we really want to gain from implementing this process? So that's decide. Number 2 is to create the actual process. So that's either a brainstorming session with your team, which I would recommend highly. This is where you get involvement, you get ownership on their part, because if they've contributed to what that process looks like, and by the way, they'll probably have a better idea if they're the ones who do this on a day-to-day, not you as the owner. So get their input because they're going to have more buy-in when they contribute to that. And so you create the actual process. And this is where most of the shops I work with, I see breakdown because they'll write the process, they've got it, and then they think that that's the end. Right. Craig, you can interrupt me if I go too long.
No, this is why you're here, man. Keep going.
The next step is to get an approval, right? And this is paramount for a few reasons. One, I have to have some level of control in my company as an owner. I have to be able to say yes or no. This either fits with what we're trying to do or it doesn't fit with what we're trying to do. And vice versa, I also need to give my team the opportunity to take up the task. Because if I involve myself in all of the process as an owner, I will bottleneck it. And that's a lot of what we see as owners will get too heavily involved in developing process in their company. And so no process gets done, or little to no process gets done and implemented. So I need to be able to have a check and a balance that allows for autonomy on their side and control on my side. So we can come to some conclusion, right?
Yeah.
The next is to archive it. So once we have the process, it has to be somewhere that's safe and accessible. I have to be able to rely on it, that it's going to be there when I need it. I always recommend digital if you can. And it has to be accessible because it's not just a document, it's a tool. Yes. Your process is a tool. And this is where, something like a DVI comes in because it is literally process in tool form, right?
Yeah.
It's usable, it's physical, it's something you can manipulate and use. And that's what I really love about DVIs. So if you don't have one, get one. Even just for the sales conversion, like just do that, right?
Yeah. We'll
so it needs to be safe and accessible, meaning your whole team needs to be able to access it, both for use and for updating if need be. And then there's and that's a general like, well, of course we're supposed to implement process. What do you mean by that? There's 3 pieces to implementation. First is training. You have to train your team. You have to dedicate time to train your team on the new process. To say, this is how we do this. Let them ask questions, get that out of the way. The second is agreement. And this makes sure that they sign off on it after the training. They understand the process and are agreeing to the proposal of executing that process, right? And so if you ever need to hold people accountable, you can go back, grab that. Hey, you signed off and approved that you knew this process and you were going to execute it, right? That means that it's unbiased. They didn't do it. They agreed to it. They know it, all that. And third, you have to allow for a period of time for that process to sink into your culture and your environment, your team, right? I always recommend 21 days. It's a new habit. So if you're implementing a new process, give your team 21 days and always assign somebody, whoever the author is, should be the one that's assigned, by the way, that follows through or follows up with your team to make sure that, hey, remember guys, we're really working on this process. How are you doing with it? Are there any questions? Are we missing anything? Over a period of time, I say 3 weeks, at which time you can do a review with your team. Hey, you guys have done this really well. I think we're consistent on it. And it would go from what I would say in implementation to in operation, right? So now it's just a base process. We do this. It's part of our culture, part of our how we operate. And that's when I would say it's implemented. Your team's trained. You've checked all the T's and I's and all that. The last bit of this is the review, revise, and reissue. So if ever a process doesn't get the outcome, which Mark will tell you it's either process or people, but for me, it's very rarely that it's the process. You've already gone through this whole workflow to determine what the outcome was. It gets the outcome. We've all approved it. We've all been trained on it. We've shown that if we do the process, it gets that outcome. So if we're not getting the same outcome, it's likely a people problem. And that's when you would use some additional training there.
Yeah. And we have some good resources that'll help you identify where people are at in that as we move through here. And I love that you have a 3R piece. Chris and I talk on 3Rs, but ours are a little different. It's relate, repeat, reframe based on that book, Change or Die. But there's elements of all of this in here. It's always in there. That relational component, you've got it all. The repetition to break those habits, make new ones. And then once you're doing it, this whole RRR process that you have at the end is really that reframing of how we're doing things now. And it's just beautiful how those core ingredients are linked into here. Mark, did you have any feedback on the general process before we dive into each of these steps?
No, I would have to say that this is exactly how any process should be worked out. And it's what it is it's
I like the word discipline.
I'm trying to come up with a better word than discipline, but I like discipline.
Well, you see, one of our coworkers here, he got us all into the Jocko Willink's book, and when you get this man stared looking at you, this is a good one. Discipline equals freedom. And so as I was prepping this conversation with you guys, like this is on my mind. And then all of this stuff, there's a discipline to each piece of this. And this is usually for me where I see some failures, especially from the shop owner, when they haven't got a clear purpose on what this is. So this deciding element, this first step, I love that you put it on your 5 steps, that deciding that this is going to happen. A decision is not something that can just be brushed over and glossed on. It's like, we deal with this. We do trials for shops that are coming on. And a lot of times I can tell immediately how committed the person is to really going at the process. Maybe they already ordered some tablets and this is like, they're done talking about it. We're doing it, right?
This is even something that we add into our onboarding process or even our interview process for shops who are coming into the groups and into our consulting. Is we cover a few different questions that determine what level of, the delineation between their commitment to this or, hey, I needed help, right? Because a lot of people are going to go out there and say, I need help, or I need to do this. I want to do this, but they haven't made the decision to execute on any changes or improvements, right?
They haven't, or worse, they have a general idea of something they like. They want it. They're saying they want it. They even have this dream, not even a vision necessarily, because it hasn't been articulated yet, but this idea of something they want to do. And then they sort of soft sell it to their teams. And they're sort of like, hey, you guys want to do something like this maybe? And it's this more timid, passive approach towards getting a process going.
I will say when you're trying to get buy-in from a team, the soft sell's not bad if there's intention behind it. So if I'm going to approach my team because I've got an idea of what I think if we execute it, I think will be really beneficial for the team. I'm going to go and have one-on-one conversations just with my team and say, hey, I'm going to gauge your investment in this idea. How do you feel about it? And that gives me information for when we actually do the deliberate decision to say, hey, we're going to do this. And you're going to have most of your team go, yeah, I remember talking about that. That sounds like a good idea. I'm in.
Yeah, no. And I think
it's diplomatic.
And the diplomacy has to be there. Like assertiveness is not diplomatic, right? but you have to be able to articulate that vision. If you're not committed to the idea yourself in any way, and you're showing that in this, and you're not even trying to promote it with your individuals, and like, I think this is very important, and here's why, right? Then you're not going to get anywhere with this individual, right? Because remember that my non-scientific poll, right? We have this idea where the shop owner, yes, and I want to fix it, and the staff members sort of down here, and you're asking this guy who doesn't have that same level of ownership if this seems like something they want to do. And of course, their first thing is their feelings about themselves and how it affects their day, right?
So anytime, when I'm coaching somebody and they're like, oh, I've got this thing to do, and I got to get the technicians to start putting their oil away or clean up after themselves at the end of the day, whatever stupid process that it is, right? Put their tools away.
To start them doing.
Right. And so the thing that I always say is, hey, haven't you ever sold anything before? Like, what do? Don't you start interviewing? You start asking questions, and you create a need, right? So that's really, when we're going into the discipline to decide who's the decider, how do you decide who needs the process? Well, the person, that's selling it is typically deciding the need of the process and just bringing that to light, right? So,
well, you can also weigh in and say, okay, well, what are their concerns? What are their needs? And how can I tie that into what I need out of this? How can I bring in, hey, I know you really get frustrated when you have to do X, Y, Z. This is actually going to streamline that for you and make it a little easier and simpler for you, and maybe allow you to sell more, right?
Yeah. I believe that a good process is born from someone who has ownership of the business and wants to see the business succeed. This is something that the business has to be going somewhere, and there should be constant improvement. So whoever is driving that, the decisions that have to be made or sold, I mean, it could come from the ground up. I worked in family business. Dad and grandpa were very happy with the way things were going. Me and my brother, not so much. So that was ground up. It might not be the owner, but there's lots of different avenues this can go. So that's a fun topic. But now that we've decided, hey, there's a process, it is worth doing. We have a little bit of buy-in from our key invested employees. I imagine it isn't every staff member that's going to be bought in yet, but your people that are going to be involved in the process need to have that buy-in early. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Leaders lead.
Yes.
Yeah. So now who's going to create it though? Does it have to be the guy who gave the vision, or can it be the guys that they're the visionary, the integrator kind of?
You can delegate that. Man, I hope not. That's too much work for any one person. And honestly, the results you're going to get if you're the one, right? And that's what I mean by that. And the results you're going to get if it is just one person, and you're an owner who thinks that they need to write all the process, that result is going to be far less in quality than if you invest in having your team
you guys
have different skill sets and different. You're going to get something much better if you involve a lot of people with a lot of different talents.
I've literally seen this, and Mark, you probably have too. We're an owner, especially when it comes to DVI. They decide what that inspection process, like all the line items on the DVI, all the categories on the DVI, everything is all like, he's not even ready to start implementing it. Talk to his team about it. Anything, hasn't introduced anybody to anything about the process at all until
Monday morning we're starting.
Done. Yes. And then they drop it.
All right, see you guys later.
Yes. Yeah, there's a false start, right?
Right.
Yeah. No, this is also where that. Go ahead, Mark.
But Craig, that isn't. I know we're mainly talking about DVIs, but this is every process, right?
Process.
So we have to do this with everything. We have to make sure there's a need for it, proof that it works, make sure that it's easy to use, and the process should actually give you results. So like all of those things, we have to have that for every process that we do. And that should be something that we just spew all the time. Anytime we're going to create a new process, you follow the 5 steps, and you have to make sure that it's got, it's core basic values
I will say that if you do this and you're doing a team, you have your team contributing to this, you can run into the issue of like too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yes.
And so having a decision of what the outcome is beforehand, and having done that preliminary diplomatic, we want this outcome, we're looking for this outcome. There has to be some guidelines on it to make sure that it's not all the cooks in the kitchen. Right. Again, one of our core principles of the Institute is everyone has to win. You bring that same methodology into this process of like, look, we can't make it really easy for the service advisor and make it really difficult for the technician. We all have to benefit from the implementation of this process, including, everyone involved in the company, as well as our customers.
It's funny because like when I coach people, I never really thought about it until right this second, Kent. When we talk about everybody needs to win, I've had a concept for years. We talk about the pie plate. There's 3 pieces in the pie. It's the shareholder or the business owner, the customer, and then the employees at the shop. Like it's those 3 people are the people that are always on that pie plate that you're trying to balance.
Yeah.
And if one person eats too much of the pie, then the other people fall off the pie plate that you're balancing.
Yeah. One of the things you don't have on here, Chris, or Craig, excuse me.
All right.
That's my bad.
Mixed up sometimes. You're not brothers,
false starts. I was looking at Chris Monroe as I was saying this. So,
and I've been calling him
that's my
George
bad.
this whole time. This is
I know.
crazy.
But one of the common failures you don't have on here is the disruption. So what you can really do if you can do some serious damage if you're trying to implement a process and you don't have the plan and you don't have the agreement with your team and involvement in your team. And doing that false start can cause so much disruption with your existing operations that you're taking a risk at ruining what you already have.
I would argue you could actually plan on there to be some disruption, but it's manageable.
And that's the thing. You should look for manageable disruption, making sure that it's only in the disruption is only in the effort of the outcome you designed or decided for this process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now we get into that approval piece. Now this I wanted some clarity from you on, because when I look for that approval, this is where I'm thinking buy-in, but this is almost even before it's to the full staff. This seems like this is the process team, right? This is our group of people. Like, here's what we have. Now we're reviewing what we've built. And now we think we're ready to roll out. You talked earlier about the same page dilemma. When people aren't on the same page, what's the issue? Is this the area where we solve it?
Well, so when I talk about approval, this is during the creation stages where you invest most of the team, because that's where you're going to get a lot of ownership from them. And they already know that this is something we're probably doing as a company, right? If I've involved the key people that are going to be involved in this process.
Yeah. But not necessarily
there you go, key
all
people.
staff,
So
especially large organizations.
Right. So
democracy would fail.
So when I mean approval here is within your corporate structure. Yes. So if I have a leader in this area, they're going to report and say, hey, we've tested this process. The team has put this together. It should get this outcome. And they go up to the higher level or their manager to say, hey, is this something we want to move forward on? That's where you get the check and balance of autonomy versus control, down your hierarchy, down your chain of command.
Yeah. When I was looking at your creation steps here and I was comparing it, it's like we have decide on our why and this purpose. We've got that element and then we're going to create it. This is what we're making. But now we're really debating how we're going to do it. This approval process isn't about if anymore. This is about how. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Perfect. I think we get it then. Beautiful. Now, moving on to the documentation, I love that you have this on your chart because I ask this question a lot. Do you have any of your process written down? I will say one of our good friends and clients, Kareem Morsley from Winkler Automotive, one of the absolute finest examples of a written process I've ever seen. One of these days, I need to remember to get him on here and share that because it's amazing. And it's a wonderful document that can be used later on for onboarding. And true or false, turnover is a thing in your business.
No, never.
True.
Never?
Yeah.
No.
Never.
Right? Yeah.
No.
It's an obvious, right? Rhetorical question. And this is something that the shops are constantly having to deal with. When you get a new guy in, we got to train him. We support that here at Autoflow, but that's something that internally there needs to be for every single process, something you can give them that they can look at and understand.
Again, the process is not just there to help execute on the day-to-day. The process is also there to train new employees, retrain employees, hold accountability, And then if you're getting to a point where you're trying to expand or grow your business, that training component and having those pieces in place are going to be so crucial to that, especially if you're going to the multi-shop operation where you're expanding your operations. If you don't have those pieces in place to then basically spread how you do things across all of the different locations, it can be really, really difficult.
Well, and I would take it another point too, and I think you'll agree with this, like getting feedback from the process for our team as we get ready to implement it. If it's not written down, it's very difficult to get specific feedback on specific areas of the process. You just have general feelings. You might even have misconceptions about what you're asking. It might have been poorly communicated through that. If it isn't written down, it's still just an idea in my book. But having that written down, somebody can say, this part right here, I need more clarity on that.
Yep.
It makes it so much more simple. And that's one of the questions I received in the registration feedback. We've had a couple people mention this. They didn't feel like they're getting honest feedback from their staff members on how or if this process is working. But some of that might be due to documentation or lack thereof.
Absolutely.
It's going to be, it's a breakdown of communication. They might not understand their position in that process. They might not understand the benefit that they receive from that process. It wasn't communicated to them well enough. And they don't necessarily understand if they are executing it properly.
That exactly
right.
That. Yep. Well said.
So like one of the concepts that we teach at the Institute is to have a process for everything that stems from the way that flow happens in the shop. So you start off, the RO gets, the customer calls in, and then the next step in the process is the RO gets written up. The next, and there's checkpoints. That's one of the things actually I like about the Autoflow software, is because it's got some of those checkpoints baked into it, and it works really well with what I teach. That each one of those little checkpoints that happen, and I actually have, so at my shop, I had like a 9-page document bolted to the wall that had everybody's, okay, at this checkpoint, this is what happens. Here's who's responsible. And then the very last step in that process was, and you're responsible to communicate everything that needs to be communicated to the person in the next step.
Yeah.
The point is that, when we're talking about archiving it, I had it where it was so visible, everyone in the shop knew everyone's job as the RO was going through the shop.
Absolutely. Spot on. I will say every larger organization, once you get more than 2 or 3 shops that I've ever worked with, is pretty good at documenting processes out of sheer pain, I expect, of having gone through that growth of having to try to express ideas one at a time.
Out of sheer pain.
Because you won't scale at all if you haven't gotten mastered.
There's a lot of shops out there that shop owners out there that want to do the MSO, and they get themselves in trouble because they go from 1 shop to 2 shops.
Yep.
And they didn't have everything down pat in that first shop.
1 to 2.
Right. And then they're like, well, I can make my money back if I just buy 2 or 3 more shops. And then they completely blow the issue even further out of the water, hoping that the revenue from the other multiple shops will cover the mistake. It's not worth it.
We all have friends that we've seen do this. They've gone from 2 back to 1, and there's some pretty major reasons that could be coached through.
I love it. If it isn't written down, it's just an idea.
I like it. And then we get to the implementation piece. Write that down.
I did write it down. See, look, we're in the webinar. I'm still writing notes. Okay. Right.
Absolutely.
Write it down. Document everything, everyone.
Yeah. And it's a discipline. It is a discipline. My wife learns better than I do. Absolutely. And you know why? She writes things down. Every time I see her, she writes notes. She's so good at it, and they're legible. Now we get to implementation, and this is where we'll spend most of our time, right? And this is where you guys have probably seen a lot of prep work before, a lot of stuff going good through a creation process, and nothing. It just doesn't ever see the light of day. There's an initiation component to this, that there's certain types of leaders I've seen that are very good at this, and then there's others that they hold back and they're cautious. They don't feel like it's perfect yet. They don't quite get it to the point where you hit the start button, whatever it is. Why is that?
So like here, this is after you've decided that you needed it, You had some proof that it works. You are now in the process of making it easy to use. And now it's time to hold your people accountable to continue to use it. Like that's, and
Well,
we talk about a 21-day process, right?
Yeah.
Like that's where you are here. This is your whole implementation is all about making sure that you're accountable to yourself, you're accountable to your team, you're accountable to the rule that you had made and the process that you had made, that it's going to happen. So that way it does serve its purpose and get a result.
Yeah.
In a more practical sense, for people who are looking to execute this, the implementation period or stage of this process has a date on when we're going to do training with the team.
Beautiful.
It has a date for them to show competency, right? We said we want them to show competency and get agreement, meaning they've signed off on it. And this also has a date for when we transition from learning and practicing this process to it is considered operational. And so the reason that this breaks down in shops is in most businesses actually is just because there was not a deciding of the schedule. When do we start this? When are we doing this? When are we doing this? What are the milestones we hit? So that we have an actionable plan for implementation. And it should go train, agreement, and time for execution. Right?
Well said. Absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned habits earlier too. I want to bring that into it. Like you research this, you'll get different answers all the time. I've heard averages as high as 90 days. I've heard what you've also mentioned earlier too, around that 21, you said 21 days for a habit.
I always go a month. I honestly, like 30 days is perfect.
Yeah. 66 is the median of those ranges that I've used before when we talk about this, because what happens if it doesn't become repetitive? And then me and Chris, when we did our class on this too, remember, relate, repeat, reframe. The repeat is all about keeping it going. Repetitive tasks, new habit gets born. Now it's just what you do. If you hit turbulence in the process, or you get busier than you've ever been in your shop's history, you're going to default to what your true habits are. And I think it surprised people. They think they've done it for long enough that it is habit until things get crazy.
Yep.
So I want to say something.
Sure.
In relation to the 66 versus the 30, and I'm going to relate this to video games because I like video games.
Sure.
Studies have shown that people who play video games, and a lot of the companies out there, educational organizations who've utilized gameplay methodology, they found that and they learn a lot faster this way, is frequency of action. So when you're presented with the opportunity to make the choice to do the thing you're supposed to do more frequently, which in video games, you can literally do it, make a mistake, restart, do it, make a mistake, restart. And that frequency of action is so fast and rapid, you can learn it a lot better. The connections in your brains get more solidified over a period of time. So when you said 66 days, my thinking is, if it takes 60 to 90 days to implement a process, it's probably something that you guys aren't executing as often.
Yeah, it'd be something that's less of a common activity, right? Yeah. If
it's something you do every day, every 20 minutes of the day, every 10 minutes of the day, then a 30-day period is more likely to be effective. So you have to think about frequency of action when determining the period of time you want to get competency and understanding for your team.
Right.
There's my 2 cents on that.
No, I like it. When I'm coaching people to like try to get their day in order, their life in order, all that, like I tell them all the time, you need to take 15 minutes in the beginning of the day, get all your tasks in a priority and run your tasks in that priority. Come up with, what it is that you need to do right today, what it is that you can put off or schedule. What it is that you can delegate to someone, and then ultimately what it is that you can do that might never, ever, ever come off your task list unless you take it off.
Yeah. Brilliant.
And, but that's the thing is when you're implementing a process, and I tell them, hey, you got to do this every day. And I make them text me a picture of their task list every day for 21 days. And there's probably some people that are in our in our room today that I've made do that. And
Yeah.
it seems to work. So I would agree that 21 days is a good start. But I'll bet 66 is better.
You know, the thing is about it, like we mentioned it again, I'll invoke the Bob Greenwood quote again. Our professional responsibility is to make sure the vehicle is safe, reliable, and efficient. We're relating this to DVIs. It strikes me as odd. Like if you really embraced that why, like you could never not inspect a car when you get too busy. Like
Right.
that's a sin. I see examples of this all the time. It's like, we got too busy. I couldn't do a DVI today. I just had to get this stuff done. Well, is that your job? Banging out tires on that many cars, or is your job to make sure that every one of these vehicles goes down the road safely because it's a professional responsibility? Which one trumps the other?
Craig, I'll tell you right now, what that is that's a lack of leadership and accountability in the shop. When that happens, and the rule is we're here to do this, and the way that right is, whatever right looks like, is we're going to perform a vehicle inspection. We're going to follow the 300% rule. 100% of vehicles come in, get an inspection. 100% of the things you find on an inspection get estimated, and 100% of the things that you've estimated get presented to the customer.
Perfect.
So if you do that on a regular basis, and that's the rule, that's just, we're accountable to, that's our process. We handle that all the time. And then you back it up and you say, by the way, every one of those inspections are going to be a digital inspection. No, you cannot write it down because I've taken all the paper inspections and thrown them in the trash. And there's nothing for you to use for anything else. I had to do that at a shop. I did. I had to take all their paper inspections, throw them in the trash, and take the trash out.
It seemed like it was still an option to go this way, still an option to fall back into something else. Yeah.
We're going
sometimes you have to remove the
we're going
net.
forward.
Yeah. Interesting.
Here, this is where, I would bring up team meetings. So how often are you meeting with your team? Are you doing a morning stand-up, daily stand-ups where you're doing 5 to 10 minutes in the morning, 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the day? This is a weekly meeting with your team, a monthly meeting with your team. I mean, like the frequency of meetings allows you more communication. And when you're talking about implementing a process and you've given yourself a period of time where we're doing implementation, that's something that the person who is in charge of that, the author or the manager of that process, can bring up every morning and every day. Hey, remember, we're implementing this process. How are you guys doing on it? Do you have any questions?
And that's a perfect segue into your 3 R's on this piece, because those sort of meetings, this is the perfect moment where this sort of thing can occur.
Yep.
Yeah. For me,
review, revise, and reissue.
Review, revise, reissue. We'll stack that right in the relate, repeat, reframe. And I'm hearing Scott Smyer, my colleague in the background too, because he's got another R that had to do with communication, and they're slipping my mind, but it was like resentment, revenge, and something else. And there's so many 3 R's.
Dark.
It's really funny how there's so many 3 R's. It's like, I don't know. It's like pirates really just work their way into our acronyms. Get it? Yeah, there you go.
So the revise, reissue, review, revise, and reissue. This is where it's like, I would say monthly, you should be reviewing with your team processes that are already in operation. And you can do it monthly or quarterly, but saying, hey, is there any process where we seem to be breaking down? And just bring them to the forefront. The other thing you want to look for is pattern failure. So when it's okay, people mess up every now and then. That doesn't mean the process doesn't work.
Yeah, is it just one guy, or is it everybody?
It's broken down. Right. Because you can go whole scorched earth for just a simple mistake that somebody made. It's when you have pattern failure where it's continually having a problem, where you need to bring it up and say, okay, our process has a people problem, right?
Yeah, sure.
Then you would go into, reviewing the process with your team. You'd revise any of the changes that you think you need to make or would want to test out, and then you reissue. You'd follow the same implementation process. You're going to do training, you're going to get agreement. You're going to do all of the same stuff.
Yeah. Now, see, this is for me the area where buy-in really becomes important. I feel like once a process has been attempted diligently with the effort to make the vision a reality, that's where the real good feedback is going to happen. And you get a sense for this. You get a sense for the guy that he maybe wants it to fail, isn't committed to it, never bought into the why, and he's been giving you feedback all along, and it feels like you're just dragging an anchor through this thing that you want to get done. But now if they're actually putting their effort into it and potentially getting results, you can actually ask them about the results they're getting. And if those are showing positive, that might change their mind a lot better than you just speaking at them or preaching, as we like to do.
I love that. Sorry, go ahead.
Go, no, please.
I was curious, and those of you who are watching this, or even anybody who's watching the recording, I'd love to know, how frequently are you having meetings with your team where you discuss process?
Yeah, pop that.
I'd love to see that in the chat. Yeah.
Are they weekly? Are they monthly? Is it a couple times a week?
And how frequently? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
what's
pop
the
that in chat.
formality?
What was that, Mark?
And what's the formality on it? Is this an
we're
on
making
the
this
go,
question.
like in the middle of the day leadership? Is this a stand up in the morning for 10 minutes? Or is this a weekly sit down lunch and learn or something like that?
Yeah, big fan of the lunch and learns personally. But yeah, once a week for those at least would be my ideal. Now, I want to go into this while people try to give us some feedback on that. Now, this is called the concerns-based adoption model, CBAM. Chris and I presented on this also in Vision. It's a great visual for the concerns that we have. There's two types of concerns. Well, there's two types of the concerns-based adoption model. There's the part that deals with feelings, and then there's the part that deals with skills. Both things are coming into play as the process begins implementation. And I want to highlight this chart here, because what we're looking at is really the beginning part of the process. And at the beginning, people's feelings, they don't even know what to be concerned about potentially. They might have some presuppositions about what to be concerned about, but they haven't experienced them yet. Once you start doing some things, the concern's going to come in. They're going to need more information. They're going to need the training. They're going to need all that stuff. And they might feel that it's still about them here too, where they want to understand more. This is a personal relation with this piece. We get down into this part here, and this is what we call the implementation dip. When you start doing something new, your performance is going to decrease briefly, hopefully not the extreme of this chart, but you're going to feel that. And the larger organizations that are implementing major processes are acutely aware of this, and they will manage through it. The feelings also can be managed through it. And so you get the questions like, oh, I've got one more thing to do, but at least they're talking about things now, and they're starting to weigh the consequences. They can see like, all right, I'm doing this now. What's the impact it's having on the clients? It's a concern that I'll have. It's a feeling that I'll start to get. And then we start growing. And we start, wow, like things are going all right, better. Well, how's everyone else doing with this? It starts becoming about other people, and then they can start focusing on all making it better. And I think it's even easier to view in a ladder format because this is where you can really see there's these initial concerns where it's all about the individual, and every staff member, especially a staff member, not the people that were bought into the process during the creation part and were bought in and sold on implementing it and wanting it to see it succeed. But we're talking staff now. And this is where me, it, us comes in. And it's always going to start with me, the individual staff member. And you guys know these very specific technicians, right? The older tech. This is mentioned all the time.
What's in it for me?
Yeah, what's in it for me? But that's not unrealistic. It is not something that we should make them feel bad about asking. This is a manageable feeling. This is something that we can help them answer. It's a stage you actually have got to go through, and different people are going to go through it at different stages at different times. They might be all over the chart, even though we're at the same part of the process. But I really, really think that this is where you want to try to move them through it. Once you have that individual giving you some negative feedback about this thing, they're grumpy, they don't like it, it's taking them more time. Like, all right, wow, it takes me longer. Hey,
I have a suggestion.
We're on it now, not on just me anymore, but now we're talking about it. Go ahead, Mark.
I have a suggestion to that point. I hate to stop you in the middle. Is it okay if I do that?
Yeah, please.
So when you have that older technician that is against your change, whatever it is, the thing that you have to do, and it doesn't matter what process it is, whether it's implementing a DVI or it's like implementing everybody's got to come into work 10 minutes early process, whatever it is, that you have to ask that technician, you have to get to the why. you always have to dig into the why. Okay, why is it? Why don't you like this? Okay, so the first thing is let's come up with a why. It's gonna, well, here you have it on the screen. It's gonna take me longer.
Yeah.
I'm spending more time to perform a digital inspection than I would a normal inspection. And I don't think like we're getting any better results, because it goes to the next one, the consequence. I don't think we're getting any better results. Okay, so why do you feel that way? Because this is a feeling, right? He doesn't have any data to back it up. There's no way that he's got data to back it up.
Yep.
It's taking me longer and this and that. And so what you have to do is you have to say, okay, cool, I get it. And so how about I go get some data and we'll go look at that and look at what's actually
Let me give you an
happening.
example. In our shop, I had a technician adamantly opposed to doing inspections. He's a diag tech. He's not doing inspections. We could argue that all day with words.
Oh, yeah.
Most good diag techs I know have a great routine around a car where they're doing some
Right.
inspections as well. But once I communicated to him the raving reviews of the customers on the inspection results that he gave me, and that it got this, that, and the other thing approved, he's
Right.
like, huh, okay.
And that's what I
He's
was
now
getting to.
starting to hear the impact.
Pe-
Yep.
people
That's what I was
have-
getting to, is you have a motivation that you have to uncover the motivation. Is the motivation a financial motivation? We're going to make more money out of this. Is the motivation we're going to take care of the customer better out of this? Like our job is this, we're going to get this. This is the result that we're going to get by doing that. And so whatever that is, or is it, hey, you're going to get so many more hours on your jobs, you're going to be able to actually leave earlier because you're just going to have to work on 2 cars a day.
Yeah.
So whatever it is, after you get the why, then you find out, some data that you can use to back it up, and you become a salesperson.
Yeah.
And then you open up that motivation, whatever it is that's motivating that particular technician. Every one of your people are going to be different.
Sure.
They're going to
No,
get
but then
motivated.
you get that
differently.
one tech who's got more hours than anybody else he's producing in the shop. And then it's like, and then someone else looking over his shoulders like, all right, what are you doing different? And they start showing, oh, when I do my DVIs, I'm documenting this, that, and the other thing. Is like, oh, yeah. I mean, once you start hitting that collaboration level,
Right.
this self-replicates. It's
Right.
now a part of the culture in the shop. When you get your team at this level, this is great. But that culture is not taking root. Your culture is a me-based focus. If you never get out of that orange level.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I love being able to visualize it like this. And then it gets to the actual skills, because this is the other side of it. You might have a guy who's just not good at a thing. And DVI, I don't see where there is a competent technician or service advisor in our midst that can't use digital inspections. But there are other processes where skills do come in. Maybe it is just raw, like technology skills. They just don't know how to use a device. I think that's waning. I don't run into that one much anymore. 5 years ago, I still used to see it a lot more. I think
they've run out of the excuse of like, oh, that's not going to catch. Everyone's using them now, so you can't say.
Well, everybody's got one of these in their pocket. This is just a smaller version of that, right?
That's my argument too, man.
and on top of that, anybody that's going to be a technician that's going to be working in the shop, it's a real good chance that they've had to use a scan tool, that they've had to use a computer.
The technology argument is just
get into their Mitchell or all data. I mean,
it's a non-starter for me. It seems more like
you're telling me you can work with the coding on the car and do all that stuff, and you can't work a tablet.
Yeah, I sure hope that's
DVI system.
Yeah,
like
where I see it still is the time component. So non-use, that starts out, people just aren't doing it yet. There maybe is no accountability. It doesn't do anything. You're still at where you began, right? Preparation. You have to actually have materials and show them a way to do things. Some of the stuff that you're going to, maybe your inspection sheet is totally foreign. It doesn't even follow the paper sheet that you were using anymore. Any of those things. There's some mechanical pieces that come into this stuff. And by the time you've resolved those things, you should be pulling out of this stuff. There's a routine that is established now. I've gone through the pain of learning. I've gone through that slow process of trying something new, which we're always going to be a little slower at something new. And technicians mostly today that fear the technology, they don't like sucking at what they do. They like being the expert. And anything new, you aren't suddenly the expert anymore. That hits the ego a little bit different.
Well, a lot of their worth comes from that. A lot of their worth comes from that because they're the guys who fix it.
Oh yeah. Dude, I enjoyed my time as a technician, and I was proud of how fast I could get things done. And that is what made me feel good as a tech, is how fast I could get it done. And that was that. Yep. We got to get out of that a little bit. But then we get refinements, we get better at what we do. We start adapting at a larger scale, and then we just keep making tweaks and improvement. It is now a constant thing. And that, again, gets into a cultural element of the shop at this stage. Once people are motivated to do this, it's amazing, but you got to get through that dip, and don't think that it won't happen to you. The problem I see, and Mark and Kent, I think you'll probably agree, people hit the dip, they freak out, they say, this isn't working, they give up, and they can it.
Yep. 9 times out of 10, that's the reason why they haven't been able to push forward, because they haven't hit that swoop yet.
Yep.
They haven't been able to pull out.
Yep.
Yeah. No, this is fun stuff. So hopefully these graphics are helpful to visualize this. I think this is the main thing that some of you who are talking about feedback from your team, especially not feeling that was true feedback, try to figure out where that individual is at on any of these charts. You'll get a better sense of what area you might be able to focus in the conversations to help them through that area. It is not something that you hit, say, and just accept that, oh, we're in that rough patch, pull through it. That's going to be the way to go. Any closing remarks from you guys on these materials?
No, I love it.
Awesome.
I love the graphics. You've done a really good job with that.
Oh, hey, thanks, man. No,
Yeah,
this all came right from conversations we've had, and then building on conversations me and Chris have been privileged to be able to share as well. I think that you guys are hitting these topics from an area that we don't always think about. So this level of collaboration, this is what I love. This is what I love. So thank you for being here. Do you guys have any closing remarks you'd like to leave our audience with? Maybe a St. Pete event that's coming up that you want to let them know about, or anything like that?
Actually, when we're talking about relationships and understanding, I mean, you had a whole graph for feelings, Craig.
Yeah.
So we actually do have a speaker who's going to be talking about EQ, and she's quite phenomenal at our event that's coming up on January 31st through February 3rd in St. Pete, Florida. If you guys want to check that out, am I allowed to do a?
Yes, man.
Okay.
Please let them know about
you can find that at wearetheinstitute.com/institute-summit, and we hope to see you there.
Or just go navigate the website to the place where it says events.
Nice.
For us old people up here with the gray hair.
Yeah, well, our snow is starting right on time here today with this blizzard that's coming through. So yeah, this is Florida sounds wonderful, guys. I hope that event is a smashing success.
And
First
first ever. I do want to say that if the man that I brought up reference at the beginning of this in my class, if you're out there and you hear the word process, I hope you don't flinch. I hope you pull through. The consistency and the benefit of that of implementing process is going to change your life.
That's awesome.
People and process and product. That's what I stole it from Marcus Lemonis, but I'm going to tell you, it's worked every time I've gone into a shop to try to make sense of what's going on. People, process, and product. It always seems to be the main things. And, once you get processes down, and, I love Kent came up with this great process for making processes. It's he's probably got a box of boxes somewhere.
He's
in his
probably got a
office. We know
process
it,
for
but-
making processes and make processes.
Yeah.
Guys, don't spoil my secret,
Under his desk, there
is
is a box of boxes.
I want to say a huge thank you to Craig. It took us a little while, but we got here, and
Oh yeah.
and I want to do more of these with you. This
Absolutely.
has been just an
We'll do this
absolute
again.
pleasure. I'm hoping that the viewers out there really enjoyed the content that we covered. I think it's been really, really just good stuff. So thank you
Awesome.
again
Oh,
for inviting
absolutely.
us.
Nope. We'll have to schedule another hot tub event and then get a new topic.
We
how
should
it's
do
gonna
one
go.
of these from a hot tub.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah. Why hasn't this
right.
happened?
All right, let's
Industry
do
first. Well, thank you so much for joining us, guys. Once again, please reach out to our friends if you have any questions or you want to hear some feedback. I appreciate all of you taking your time in your busy week to join us. We'll see you soon. Goodbye.